Every week on Ask GMBN Tech, we get loads of questions to answer all about the world of technical stuff in mountain biking. We're talking about the nitty gritty, how to put a bottom bracket in, what happens if your chain snaps, all of that sort of stuff. As a result of that, we get a lot of very similar questions coming through. So I'm going to take this opportunity today to go through 5 of the most common questions we get asked. All right, now first off is a cassette related question, and it's why does my cassette get stuck on the Freehub body when I remove it from the bike? Right, so bear with us here, give you a little bit of an explanation. There are 2 main types of Freehub body that go on the bike. You get the SRAM XD style and you get the regular spline style. So this was also known as the Shimano style. Now, if you have the SRAM style system on your bike, you're not really going to have many problems because of the design of the cassette. It's a single piece. It slides all the way on to line up with these and literally screws on. So you won't get an issue with that. So it doesn't happen with that design. But the other design slides onto these splines here, and then it has a thread pitch in the end here. Then you have a lock ring that secures the whole cassette onto the hub. Now, there are various different designs of cassette and the way that they slide onto the hub, and this is where the problem can arise. Now, this particular one looks quite new. You can see it's got nice sharp edges, but this one here, you can see it's got some slight damage here, and this is because of the actual design of the cassette. I'm just going to show you the difference between a couple here. So this particular cassette has its own little carrier. So there's one unit that will slide on, the next part that will slide on, and you've got a few individuals. So obviously these are supported by its own spider. So no matter what happens to those, the stress goes through this bigger piece that spreads that load out. On some cassette designs, and you get the single little sprockets like this one, they can cut their way in. And eventually on some Freehub designs, on lighter aluminium ones, they can cut all the way through. So if this is happening, when you go to remove your cassette, you can quite often pull the whole Freehub body off your bike. Now if that happens, the way around that really is by keeping it on hub. Don't try and pull the whole Freehub body off because it does make it harder to get it all back on again. Keep it on the hub and use your chain whip to hold it securely. Now you need to find out which one of these sprockets is the culprit really, and basically you want to be tapping them slightly loose. Now the way I would recommend doing it is with a mallet and a really old blunt screwdriver. One by one, just tap away at each of those sprockets just to shock them loose. And you'll find after a while you'll be able to whistle them loose and remove them from that Freehub body. Now in an ideal world, if yours is damaged more than this particular one, you're going to need a new Freehub body. But this one, because it's only slight damage, I would probably just file away any burrs there and use it again, but also just pay attention to it because you might also need to repeat this process to remove a cassette in the long run. In an ideal world, pick a cassette that has more carrier-based system so there's less chance of it happening, and make sure that the Freehub body on your bike is of a harder material. Now, just for example, I used the brand Hope earlier. They make aluminium ones and it also makes steel ones. Now, steel one obviously is going to be far more resistant to this happening in the first place if you have this design. So that is the way to get around that problem. Okay, next up, I want to install volume spacers into my shock, but I think it's an older RockShox model. Can I do this? Yeah, okay, so let's go a little bit into volume spacers because there's a whole bunch of different ones for different shocks and different forks, and there's a lot of similarities between how you use them and the sort of compatibility as well. So if I just delve into here, so first up, let's look at those older RockShox shocks. So we're talking about the Monarch, Monarch Plus, even in some cases the Debon Air. So you can use volume reducing spacers on those, and basically this is what they look like. So it's like a rubber band, effectively. It's a specific material, a bit more hardy than a rubber band, so you probably don't want to use one of those. But it's a very simple system. Release some air out of the air valve, in fact all of the air, make sure it's fully out of there. Then on the outside you'll see there's an O-ring. So very carefully using a fine pick or an old screwdriver, be careful not to scratch your shock. You just want to remove this O-ring and slide it away from the shock itself. Then you'll find that there's the whole outer sleeve will just slide away, and you'll probably see there might be a couple of spaces under there already on that inner sleeve. Now this is where you can go for your life and fill it up with more spacers, but make sure you don't cover up the little air ports. That's this bit just circled right here on screen. Now that's the bit where the air needs to transfer between the ports, so make sure you don't block that. and then essentially slide it back on, put the O-ring back on and repressurize your shock, and you will have a slightly different characteristic of your air spring in there. Now, if you have one of the slightly newer RockShox shocks, we're talking about the Super Deluxe, like this one on my old Nukeproof Mega on screen, they have a slightly different system. So the actual air volume spacers are actually a spacer rather than a band, like the old ones, and it clips onto the air rod on the inside of the shock. Now, these are just about as easy to install. It's a very simple process. Now, the RockShox system is very similar to the Fox system, and the Fox spacers look like this, essentially. They come in various different sizes and shapes, both for adjusting the amount that you want to sort of make the shock feel progressive by, and also to fit your different shocks. I think that one's from a DHX Air, an ancient shock. I think this one's from a Flotex. There's various different ones available to you, and they fit in exactly the same way. You have to depressurize the shock, unscrew the actual shock can itself, slide it away, exposing that inner air tube, and then clip them onto the air tube itself. But unlike the RockShox ones where you stack them up, the Fox ones, you simply pick the size that you need to adjust that air volume. So kind of similar, same but different. So there you go, that's what you need to do. Pretty much there is an option for everyone out there. Unfortunately, on some of the budget forks, you just can't do this. So your option really is to save up the pennies and upgrade your fork at a later date. How do I know when my cleats need replacing? Simply put, they'll feel a little bit baggy. It's a mechanically operated part, so you'd expect it to feel punchy and crisp and mechanical, really. As soon as it feels a bit round and a bit vague, it's very likely that either something's loose or your cleats are worn. Now, this is accentuated if you use Shimano pedals, because the Shimano retention system relies on a very positive engagement. It's such a defined click when you engage, and there's no movement when you're engaged. As they wear, they start moving around a bit, and you start noticing this, but riders can get away with this because Shimano have adjustable tension on the retention jaws there. So you can keep adjusting that tension so it's got more of a firm feel, so they're less likely to accidentally pop out as they get worn. This is all a little bit different on Crank Brothers pedals because they don't have adjustable tension on those jaws. And there's actually quite a lot of free movement of which you can adjust by swapping the cleats between the shoes. But the point is, you've got a load of free movement before the jaws start moving to disengage. And when your cleats are really heavily worn, you just simply don't notice this transition. You still have that movement and you'll naturally just disengage without noticing it, but it will be at such an extreme that it doesn't raise itself as that much of a problem. This is also accentuated by the design of Crank Brothers pedals, that they rely on your shoe contacting the outer part of the pedal for stability. It's just part of that system, whereas Shimano pattern ones, they rely more on that cleat retention. You can have a shoe with no contact at all with the Shimano system and it will feel really controlled, whereas with the Crank system, if you had that same effect, your shoe, there's a good chance you're going to get roll and movement at that junction, where it just doesn't happen with the shoe contact concept. But one problem you do get with the Crank Brothers design is because you can't adjust the tension on those jaws, when the cleat itself gets worn, there is the danger when it gets extremely worn that you can just pop out. And of course, it doesn't take a genius to work out if you're pedaling hard or if you're bunny hopping or anything and your feet pop straight out of the pedals. It's going to be a pretty horrible situation to be in. Now, what I recommend doing is keeping some spare cleats at home. You're going to need them one day, so why not just snap a pair up when you've next got a few quid aside, keep them at home, and you can use them for reference just to see how badly worn your current ones are getting. So here's an older cleat that is actually quite worn, but it doesn't look too bad if I just hold it up. But if I hold up a cleat against it, and you can see just how worn they can get. So that's the new cleat, obviously, and that is the old cleat. Now, if you look at that leading edge where the retention actually happens, no surprise that this one accidentally clips out. It's not a problem replacing them, but just make sure you keep an eye on them. Now, something to point out is when you do replace your cleats, make sure you put a little blob of grease on the threads of the bolts when you put them in. Now, obviously this means you can get them in and to a higher torque to hold them in place and make sure they stay in place, but also it means you're going to be able to get them out again. Now, something that does happen with shoes, just because of the nature of mountain biking, and in fact road cycling as well, is you're subject to salts and stuff that are in the road and in mud and other stuff, and that corrodes those bolts in. If you've got no grease on those threads, and you go to undo the Allen bolt to basically take the cleats off the bottom of your shoe, there's a good chance you can slip and round out the bolt And then that becomes a whole separate video in which I have to show you how to drill out the bolt head to get a set of cleats off your shoes. Basically, they've been corroded on. That's a real pain to have to do that. So just make sure you save yourself the hassle in the first place by using grease on the threads, and then you're good to go. My gears are skipping, but the limit screws are set perfectly. Okay, so gears. This is the bane of people's lives, I swear. So there's so many little things that can go wrong here, even if your derailleur is adjusted correctly in the first place. So let's just take a little look at all these things that can go wrong. So you've got your limit screws at the back. They set the stops for upper and lower, so the chain can't move any further. If it's set up correctly in the first place, that is your first thing out the window. The next one is going to be your B screw, your B tension. That adjusts the height of the jockey wheel or the guide wheel. It adjusts the height of the derailleur so the chain can't foul that. But that won't be affecting your gears at all. So it's more than likely going to be one of these other things. So any amount of movement you're going to have here, that is going to wreak havoc with your gears. So make sure the hanger bolt is securely tightened. Now, because modern derailleurs have clutches, quite a lot of the time, if everything gets a bit gunked up and they're not working too well and they're not rotating correctly here, for example, bit by bit it's going to unwind that bolt, and it's going to do so on rough descent, so it's quite common for that occurrence to happen. Next up is making sure that the actual hanger itself, in this case, is bolted to the frame. It's very easy for those two bolts, in this case I think they're just 3mm Allen bolts, for them to be a tiny bit loose. If that's the case, as you're changing gear, the amount of leverage, what might be like 0.5 millimetre of movement or less up here could transfer into 2 or 3 millimeters in the crucial areas. And that's all it takes for your gears to go all over the place, the tiniest bit of movement. I've had this on bikes before and I've not been able to figure it out. Tighten those up, bingo, everything back in order. Now, another one, slightly less obvious, is the state of your chainring and your sprocket teeth. This is very unlikely, but here and there, you can bend chainring teeth, perhaps on a log, or if you've bottomed out over a rock or something like that. If that's happened, then your chain can sometimes become derailed and hook around and do stuff like that. And of course, if you get a stiff link, now it's not that common for this sort of thing to happen these days, but a stiff link typically used to occur when you rejoined a chain. The reason it's so important to have the twin sets of jaws for a trailside multi-tool is to split the chain. You sit the chain in the first set, so literally the chain is being supported by the tool, and use that to drive the pin out, and then reverse it to drive it back in again. The problem happens is when you get a stiff link, and what happens is in the process of that pin being driven back through, the outer plates can squash the inner plates of the chain just enough so it makes that chain not pivot correctly at that point. That is your stiff link. Now you can massage that link out by hand. It's quite hard to do that. That's a last resort. What you really want to be doing is using the secondary set of jaws, so that's the inner set on a chain tool, and all you do is sit the chain in there at the point of this stiff link, find that one, and then just adjust the driver on it until it just pushes against it. You're not looking to push that pin out in any way at all. All you're doing is holding the inner part of the chain, and in pushing against the pin, you actually push the plates marginally apart. We're talking like a fractional amount, just enough to release that stiff link. And when you've done that, massage it a bit and make sure it moves correctly, spin the chain through, and you'll find it will work really well. Another thing, a little less common and quite a lot more extreme, is for your cassette to be slightly loose. This doesn't tend to happen with SRAM cassettes because they tend to be a single piece, but the Shimano style cassette, where they go on in multiple pieces on the splines like we talked about at the beginning of the show, if your lock ring is the tiniest bit loose, those bottom sprockets can just move fractionally. Now, of course, the other parts, the final parts to talk about here, are your guide wheels themselves. If they're worn out and they don't look like this, if they've basically got like really rounded tooth profiles on, that's going to cause you problems. And if the bearings in them, or bushes, depending on which type you have, if they're knackered or notchy or anything, you can stop the wheels turning properly. And again, that's going to create you problems. But you have to make sure that these are working perfectly all the time, which is why we recommend maintaining them, treating them to fresh cables every now and then, and making sure that they're well looked after. If you look in the description below this video, I'm going to put a link in there to our Essentials video, and explains everything about how your transmission works. It's essentially a parallelogram design with a spring, so all the information is in there. If you watch that and you understand what's going on, you can already work out what the problems are as they arise, because you can start understanding where it's coming from. So definitely check that video out, it'll definitely be a help. I'm getting hand and wrist pain on longer rides. How do I get around this? Okay, so this is all about your position on the bike fundamentally. So there's a lot of different things that can happen here. And then within that, there's contact points, which we're also going to talk about. So first up is your saddle position. Assuming you've probably got your saddle the correct height, you need to address the saddle angle. Is it too far forwards? Is it too far back? If your hands are hurting, it tells me that it might be too far back, which means you're leaning forwards too much and putting too much pressure on your wrists. You can also have the same effect if your saddle is tilted down at the front. Same thing, you've not got enough support, you're not carrying any weight or near enough weight on your body. Basically, you're carrying too much of that weight on your wrists. So that's the first thing you need to address. The next thing is going to be your cockpit setup. So this is going to be the height of your stem, the length of your stem, the height of your bars, how you roll your bars back and forth, how wide your bars are. There's so many different factors here. Just for example, if you've got narrow handlebars, you're going to be more upright. If you've got wider handlebars, you're going to be further down in an attack position. But of course, that puts more weight onto your hands. Now, the position of your bars, regardless of the height of them, by adjusting the roll of your bars, you adjust that sweeping and the sort of the angle on the end of the bar. Now, bear in mind, if you put your arms out straight, your grip isn't straight, it's at a slight angle, and you need to replicate that with your handlebars to suit your position once you've mastered that on the bike. Again, it really does make a difference to your sort of bias on the bike and how you like to ride. So now stem length comes into this as well. A shorter stem, you're going to be more upright. A longer stem, you're going to have more weight on your arms. Of course, a lower rise bar, more weight on your arms. A higher rise bar, less weight on your arms. There's lots of different factors. And then, of course, there's the actual grips themselves. These can make a massive difference. So you get some grips that are really fat and have got loads of cushioning. They're really good for reducing hand fatigue. But if you've got small hands, it actually increases hand fatigue. So there's so many different options here to go into. But something that is important to remember is a lot of handlebar grips like these from Ergon on the market, they're designed to be run in a very specific position. So this is marked as the up position. If I just rotate this, you'll see the grip has almost an upsweep at the end in this position and on the opposite. So if you are actually running these in the wrong position, it's actually going to give pressure to the outside of your hand, like the ulnar nerve region, and that can create numbness and fatigue. So a grip like this, whilst they're excellent, they have to be run in the correct position, so they sit into your hand properly. They also make a grip, which I'm actually keen to try myself because I've got a wrist problem, with a slight wing on it, which gives you more support on this part of your hand. So it doesn't take a genius to work out on certain types of riding, especially long rides. This is going to give you way more support than a conventional just a round grip will, because your hand's just going to move and deform around the bar. Another thing to mention is your position of your brake levers. Now this is crucial because if your brake levers are too far down, you're going to be reaching for them. You're going to be hyper-extending your wrist. That adds more pressure to your hand. You've got to make it easy for yourself. And of course, running your brake levers too high can mean the opposite. You're putting a kink in your wrist, and again, that's going to put more pressure on your hand. There's a happy medium, and you need to find this. And again, we've got a whole video all about cockpit setup, so make sure you check this one out. That's in the link below this very video. And hopefully that will help you sort of play around and experiment and at least understand where your problems can come from. So there we go, there are 5 of the more recent common queries we have. For our previous video with these following 5 queries, we answered those and hopefully helped a bunch of you out. Click through to that, it's right over here. And as always, don't forget to subscribe if you've not already subscribed, and please share it around. We want everyone to benefit from loads of cool information like this. And if you like mountain bikes and tech, give us a thumbs up.